Angeles. My name is Andrew McGregor, and I have the profound privilege of serving as vice president here. We are a 100-plus-year-old organization that drives community, serves to gather, share, and disseminate information about the pursuit and experience of adventure. And in that vein and tradition, I am humbled and honored and ecstatic to welcome to the stage Chad Allen, who is a blind magician. Chad, thank you so much for blessing our club with your brilliance, and I'm profoundly looking forward to this conversation.
I'm excited to be here. This is amazing. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So it almost seems like a...
Real quick, sorry, your mic, I think, is muted, Chad. Can you flip the switch on the side?
Test 1, 2, 3.
There you go.
Good?
More magic.
Yes.
The magic of technology.
Yes.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking to everyone in the world, theoretically.
Fantastic.
Separate conversation. Yeah, blind magic, it seems almost like an intractable paradox, but you have owned this paradox and kind of become something through it. Do you want to kind of talk about your life and how it came to be and things like that?
Sure. I mean, the blindness or the magic or both?
Let's start with the blindness, and then how the blindness went into the magic, and then how that synthesis occurred.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa as a teenager. I was 15 years old. It was a very challenging time being a teenager, finding out you're going blind. My parents were getting divorced also that same year, so it was like quite a bit of disruption in my life. Once that happened, my attitude about blindness was really almost non-existent because I didn't even use the term blind. It started off as a night blindness and then eventually led to narrowing of my periphery. I would do all the things that I could do to get myself in trouble as a teenager. And when I became of age where I could leave the house, as I said, I kind of had a defeatist attitude about my vision loss then. And I said, if I'm going to get an opportunity to see the world, I better do it now. And I decided on Colorado. And when I moved to Denver, there was just everything. I was born and raised in Rhode Island. So Colorado was kind of everything Rhode Island wasn't. Mountainous, landlocked, a whole new world to explore. And I kind of went through my vision loss time as a young adult there. One of the first things I did when I was looking for employment was I used to work at a record store in Newport, Rhode Island, hence the music. And I was trying to find the same kind of job in Denver, and there really wasn't an opportunity for that. A friend of mine told me about a costume shop that was hiring, and it was a place called the Wizard's Chest, which I think we talked about earlier. You're from Colorado,
Yeah.
so you know this place.
I do.
And so it's a fantastic place. It's a big purple castle with a drawbridge, got tons of games, costumes, juggling, magic, Estes rockets, science experiments of all kinds. And I was an avid Dungeons & Dragons player and gamer as a kid. I would take them everywhere, so when I went camping or horseback riding or anything like that, I would bring my books, and by the fire, we would, me and my friends would play these kinds of games. So it was just this fascination with story at a very, very young age. And, it got me this very fun, cool job. So I started doing that, but there was a magic counter there, but unfortunately, there was no magician. And so people would ask about the magic shop. And I would say, I have no idea. And I would go to the manager and be like, do you know when there's going to be a magician around? And they kind of put me aside and, told me the story of how they helped him set up. And then the person never showed up. And I said, so the magician disappeared. And they were like, yes, very good, Chad. I said, well, look, if I learn how to do some of this stuff, would you keep me on through Christmas? Because I was only a temporary hire. And they said yes. And so I took home my first magic trick, figured out the best I could, came up with a little bit of a story. I went back the next day. I was literally a one-trick pony. I did the trick over and over and over again, and I sold out of that trick. And so I had to go and learn another one. And that is where eventually I started meeting professionals. They would come up and buy their Genie magazines or their deck of cards or balloon animals for kid shows or whatever. And they would watch me perform and they would go, hey kid, that's not bad, but why don't you try it like this? And so I would take their advice, and eventually mentors started to come out of the woodwork. I started getting more interested in some of the technical, and there was my magic journey. But all along this whole road, I was losing my vision at quite an alarming rate. And so, I would walk to work, a couple miles every day back and forth, bumping into the concrete blocks, stepping in potholes and twisting ankles, and, trying to do my best to live a sighted life while, really becoming severely blind. And, I managed for a while, but there came a time that I was in college, and the low vision stuff just wasn't working anymore. There was a lot of anxiety with trying to see something that you just physically could not see. And so, I went to the eye doctor, and they told me that there was nothing they could do. And I went through, a pretty severe bout of sadness and self-loathing to where I sat in my apartment, kind of isolated myself from the world for a little while. And this was during the Florida election during 2000, so CNN was on constantly. I was a history major in college. And there came a moment where I'm sitting in my apartment, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't know how long it was. And I said, you know what? Life is not short. Life is long. And I can't sit here the whole time and think that I'm going to make it. And so my idea was to try and find one successful, competent blind person. So that was my mission, that was my goal. And so, did they have a job? Were they married? What did they do? Did they use a cane? Did they use a dog? What did a cane do? I knew nothing. I couldn't be more ignorant about blindness. Really, if you tried. Met 0 blind people at this point in my life. And on campus, there was a disability service office. And I went into there to use the low vision technology, and there was a blind person that was running the lab, putting computers together, moving things around, managing times for people, blah, 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 going to school, talking to his girlfriends, all these things. And I said, there was one day where it was just him and I in this lab alone. And I said, I've been observing you for a while. And I said, I have to ask you a question. Like, you're doing all this stuff, you're dating, you're doing, it seems like you're happy. How are you doing all this? And he said, you don't know about the Colorado Center for the Blind. And I said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And he gave me the name of the director and where it was. And my first day, I called the program, and they wanted me to come down and meet them. So I would have had to have taken a light rail, probably about 45 minutes from, or maybe 30 minutes, from Denver to Littleton downtown station, which I think you know. Mm-hmm. And it was a massive snowstorm. And I was like, this is my chance. I'm not gonna not go. So I went, but I told the director, like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find the school from the bus stop. And they had someone come there and direct me. And it was a blind mobility instructor. And so I'm holding on to this blind gentleman's arm, and he's navigating me through this snowstorm. And I get into the room, and I talk to Julie, and we kind of went through all the logistics of getting to be a part of the program. And she basically said, Don't worry about it. We're going to get you in here, and you're going to get the skills that you need. And so what that meant was I was going to learn Braille. I was going to learn how to use a long white cane, and I can explain that as well. I was going to learn how to use all the adaptive technology at the time, which was 2001. Cell phones were a relatively new thing, so they were incredibly inaccessible then. So that was kind of the hot topic within the blind community at that moment. But the other thing that was really interesting about this program is it wasn't, like counting steps or, something along those lines. The type of training that I got was called structured discovery. And so because I had some residual vision, which means I have a little bit of light perception at the time, I had to wear sleep shades or blindfolds the entire time that I was doing the training. So anytime that I was in that building or I was on an activity related to the center, I had to have these on. And that was part of the rule because everybody would be at the same level. And so I would learn how to manage a kitchen, home management skills using all the technology, navigating 5 lanes of traffic, being able to take an address, plan a route, get on a bus, get where I needed to go, bring a business card back to the people to prove that I was physically there. And then this went on for 6 months, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I pretty much canceled out of life to do it. But there was more involved to it than that. There was also these extreme type events that we would go do, and we called them confidence building activities. So we would go rock climbing with blindfolded. So I've climbed all over Boulder, Boulder Canyon, all those. I've done 5 pitch. I think it's been a while since I've been climbing, so stuff like that. I've been whitewater rafting blindfolded. And then I also became student body president of the group for 1 term while I was there, so that was 3 months. And one of my big jobs was to try and create a confidence building type activity. And what I heard from more than anybody, or more than any of the students and even the teachers, was this idea of being able to drive. So I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find a way to get us. So, I would talk to a couple people, and I talked to one blind guy from Idaho, and he said, oh yeah, there was this program called Blind Alley Rally, and it was like an amateur racing event, and as kind of like an attraction, they would have these stripped out cars and people with spray painted helmets on, and they would do with a sighted navigator. They would do all these audio commands to race and go through these type things. And so, I called the city, I told them what I wanted to do. They were like, there's no frickin' way you're gonna have blind people on the streets of Denver. Thank you very much. And eventually I ended up finding an organization called Master Drive. And it was a amateur racing school, but they also had a driving program as well. And when I talked to the guy, he's like, I have been waiting for you to call me for years. And so we went down, and I'll just tell you the event itself. So the day of the event, the whole school went. We spent 3 hours in the classroom talking about the science of driving, and come to find out that race car drivers love the opportunity to be able to do it blindfolded because they get a kinesthetic feel to the car. So putting their knee on the door would give them a sensation of what the car was doing and how it was reacting. So we learned all this crazy cool stuff and how we would do it on the racetrack. And then we get on the racetrack, and we drive through pylons and navigate through all that. Sighted driver, sighted passenger, blind driver, sleep shade activity again. And so, that was kind of step 1. And then the highlight was the skid recovery. So we go onto one of the tracks, and they, soak the track, and they literally tell us to let go of the vehicle. So they tell us to put our hands up in the air and let the car ride. And then they would take the wheel, and then they would jiggle it, and the car would spin out of control. And our job was to try and get the car straight again. And damn it, by the end of the day, every single student did it. And it was on CNN. It was a big, big thing. It was really great. So it's like, and the whole philosophy around this stuff is, if you can do that, you can go to a grocery store. If you can climb a mountain, you can cross this street. If you can drive a car blindfolded, you can learn to read Braille. You can get a job. You can take care of your kid. I pick my boy up from from the bus stop every day. Nobody says boo about it. I just live my life because I have the skills to know how to do it. And so, from that experience, it changed my life. It became incredibly empowering. As far as adventure type things, I haven't, wrestled a lion or anything like that. But I've done 14ers in Colorado, so 14,000 foot elevation and higher. It's a beautiful experience to be up there if you've never done that. Sitting on top of this mountain, and the only thing that grows is those little buttercup-like flowers, and the marmots that live up there are kind of prairie dog-like animals. And the best part is when a storm comes in. So you're on top of this mountain, and at 11.5 is where tree line ends, so nothing grows pretty much beyond that. It's all just rock and rubble. And but once you get over that, I have a picture somewhere. I don't know if my wife grabbed it. My wife grabbed the pictures from for the event today. But there's a moment where I'm standing on top of this. I think it was Torrey's was the name of the mountain, and this storm comes in, and the cloud's coming right for the mountain, and it splits the cloud in half, and then reforms on the other side, and I'm standing up here while it's going on, and it was the best. And that was the other great thing about that day was I did 2 14ers in one day, because there's a saddleback that connects Torrey's to Gray's. So you go up Torrey's, and then you do the saddleback, and the snow, the trail is about that wide, and you just heel toe, with the cane, and I got across that, and then I did the second 14er, so I got to sign 2, because you have those little tubes, where you put your name in to say that you've been up there. So I did 2 in one day.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
The sense of exhilaration is so visual when I've gone to the top of something, woo. What's that emotional exhilaration like? How do you know? Is someone like, you did it? Or do you just have a sense of the elevation has stopped and you're tactily connected to the mountain in a deeper way, if you will? Does that make sense? Yeah.
This may jump a little bit. So another project that I did was the audio comic, which I know we're going to get to in a little bit. But really my whole attitude about the eyes are simply a delivery system for light, right? There's no processing power in the eyes per se, if I could say it like that. So what we in fact see is with the brain. We don't see with the eye, we see with the brain. So there is a million sensations that happen when you're on top of a mountain, right? It's the texture, the taste of the air, the sounds, the openness, the fact that there's nothing but sky, for hundreds of feet or miles even around you because of what you're on top of. And so I think in a sense I am seeing. It may not be light perception, but it's everything else. And I had this reminds me of a moment. I went on this amazing adventure on my honeymoon. I went to Scotland for 2 weeks, and then I went to Paris for 8 days. And I was really just jazzed. And I had this big meeting that I had to go to up in Sacramento, and I flew back from Paris with my wife, and then the next day I had to turn around and get on a plane and go up to Sacramento. And I'm in the cab with the driver, and I'm telling him all about my experiences during my honeymoon. And he asked me this question. He's like, "Can I ask you something?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, here we go." Right? And he goes, "Why do you travel?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Why? Like you can't see it, so why spend all that money?" And I said, I thought about it for a second, and I was like, this person listened to nothing of what I was just said. He missed all of my excitement, all my joy, all the things that I got to do. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Why do you travel? And he said, "Oh, okay, I get it, to see things." And I said, "Well, why not just look at the pictures of where you want to go instead? It's a heck of a lot cheaper." So is it about seeing or is it about living? Right?
Yeah, just a kind of a brief tangent from a previous conversation. We discussed echolocation a little bit, like on the way over here, as kind of a unrealized sixth sense, if you will. Just wondering if we could diverge a bit on that, because it's just kind of fascinating realm. There was a Radiolab story a few years ago about a guy teaching echolocation and tree climbing to vision impaired humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am not a scientist, so I really, I don't want to dive in too deep to this, but there was an article that I recently read where the human brain is capable of obtaining echolocation as an ability. It's obviously something that is seen in bats, and this experiment that this article talked about was this blind person that had a really good affinity for it. And an example of this in my own personal life is my mobility instructor, Eric Woods, this guy was an adventurer. He would go anywhere, do anything, and he had the problem-solving skills to solve whatever it is that he wanted to go and do, and did it. And he called his cane the Widowmaker. So this was my mobility instructor, and he would just send me on these crazy trips, and I would listen. He would laugh, like some of the students, like especially when we were first trying to do this stuff, it would be like one would stop in the front, and then the three of us would bump into the one in the front, because we didn't have the awareness yet that we were about to obtain through this training, And he was always like cool, but you gotta listen, kind of a thing. And he could hear because his skill, not because his hearing was so advanced, but because his training as a traveler, as a blind traveler, was so good. He could hear a pole, and he would give me examples of this, because I would be like, bullshit, like, come on. And he would point it out, and he'd be like, walk 10 feet, there's a pole. And lo and behold, there it was, and like parked cars and all these crazy things. And I was so new, it was an impossibility for me to understand how to do that. But now that I've been doing it for so long, I can hear a parked car now. Maybe not the poles necessarily, not to the degree that he can, But one really great example of that, I just went ice skating the other day, and I bring my cane on the rink and, you know, do my thing. And, you know, the space between the wall, like, I can feel the flow of people, right? And it's not always like super consistent. You know, it can be like, because there's the figure skaters in the middle and all that stuff. But, you know, the smoother parts of the ice is usually where, you know, you go in, and when it gets to the rougher parts, that's usually like the sides. So I can tactually feel that with my cane. And then the wall, I can hear it, you know, when I get too close. And I can, before I even, you know, go next to it to where I can touch it, I can say, I'm getting close to that, and maneuver myself around. So it is possible. And what this study did was they taught a sighted person to do these skills. And it took him a while, but he obtained it. And so, you know, yes, the human brain is capable of a sixth sense. So I got my 5 back.
Amazing. Thank you. All right. Well, speaking of more wonderment, you've emerged from the Shaolin Temple of Blindness in Denver, and you're like, how do you get into the magic world? Not even just the magic world, the magic castle world, right? The highest echelon, arguably, in the world, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm, you know, magic counter monkey, you know, slinging tricks, you know, trying to sell stuff at the counter, and that is a great, it's a really great boot camp type experience, because you're doing tricks all day long.
Was your vision completely gone at this point, or?
So it got to the point where I could see the value of a card. Then I couldn't see the face value of a card, but I could see whether a card was face up or face down. And then eventually it got to a point where I had to use other means because I couldn't identify those types of things. And then as far as what I learned with interacting with audience members is, you know, when you read all these magic books, they're like, you know, angles is a big thing, right? So you have to really focus on that. And I learned quickly, if I just ask them a question, right? Their mouth is here, their eyes are here. If I use the information that the book is telling me to use, but instead I'm using it through what they say, not where they're looking, which is how the instructions are read, then I can pretty much do whatever it is, you know, that I want to do at the counter. And then eventually I ended up in Los Angeles, hanging out with some of the heavier hitters in magic in Colorado. You know, the world famous Magic Castle, the Mecca of magic, as magicians would call it, was just this idea. And then eventually, you know, here I am. And so it was 6 weeks after 9/11, Los Angeles. And then, you know, first on the list was becoming a member of the Magic Castle. I got my audition in January of 2002. I went downstairs into the Hat and Hare, if you've ever been inside the castle. And there's a table set up, and then the board sits in front of you, and you do your stuff. And at the end of it, a guy says to me on the board, he's like, "How did you learn that?" And, you know, that's like every question that every person asks a magician in the world. So to get this question, like, inside the Magic Castle, I was like, what do you mean? Like, right? And he's like, well, you know, you're blind. How did you learn how to do all that stuff? And I was just like, magic. So I got in, and you know, it's strange because I love magic. I always will. It's been an amazing experience. And being able to hang out in that building. Like, people love going to the castle with me because I know everybody and I know where everything is. And so I'm just like cruising through this place. And nobody knows where they're going in this building, especially when you get in there the first time, because it's a maze. And you know, to hang out with the librarians and talk shop is just so exciting. To have met so many of my idols over the years, and to have some of them even become friends, if I can be so bold, has been crazy cool. I mean, I'm just a dude from Rhode Island, you know? Like, this is very, very exciting. And, you know, but it's home. It's my favorite place. I go in, and the first thing I say is, you know, I walk in, and if you've ever been to the Magic Castle, the first thing you see is a bar. I know some of the people in the audience know Milt Larson, and one of his favorite things to build is bars. So there's bars all over the club. And, you know, so I walk in the room and I go, my favorite bar, and, you know, in Hollywood, for sure. And, you know, everybody's like, oh, yeah, it's so nice, and da-da-da-da. And then we take a right, and we go up the stairs, and there's a bar. And I say, my second favorite bar in Hollywood. And then we go through, and there's my third, and my fourth, and you know, so it's just the community of magic, like such a highly creative, interesting group of people. And, you know, the world of magic is just absolutely fascinating. The history, the culture, you know, the evolution of the art and where it goes, even in a modern era. I mean, the fact that it's still interesting to people is kind of almost fascinating because of all the things that technology can do around us. But here we are. It's a wonderful thing. And I would say the highlight of my magic career, well, I used to spend a lot of time back in Denver. I moved back for a couple years. And I ended up working at the owners of the Wizard's Chest also owned later a nightclub. And it was like this Parisian-style nightclub. And it was a burlesque and, comedy and live performance. Lanny Garrett, I don't know if you're familiar with that name, but a very famous singer in Denver. She comes out here, she used to, you know, and perform from time to time. You know, so I was the variety entertainment during the burlesque shows. You know, you can't do G-strings and tassels every single time over and over again. You got to mix it up a little bit. So I would do, you know, my act, and it was a great experience to be able to have a stage that I could really work my stuff. I don't know if you have any, you know, material on that at all, but there's definitely YouTube videos and different performances online that you can check out with that. But then right before the pandemic, so when was the pandemic?
It was a long time ago.
March, right?
Ancient
March,
history.
right. March 13th, what was it, 2020. So March 13th, 2020 was a Friday, right? Friday the 13th. And on March 11th at midnight, I was walking off the Penn Teller stage at the Rio in Las Vegas, so to film for Penn and Teller's Fool Us. So I got to perform for my idols in their house, and it was amazing. I did not fool them. I'm not that smart, but still, it was just, you know, all this tension of this potential thing that we had no idea was going to happen was kind of in the air while all this was going on. But I got to do it. It ended up airing in June of 2020. Yeah, it was amazing. It was wonderful. So I get off the stage at midnight on March 11th. We get in the car on the 12th. We go to the grocery store. And then on the 13th, we lock the door and don't come out for 2.5 years. That was my last moment of normal. Yeah. So.
What's your sense of wonderment from the audience? Like a lot of magicians I know, they love like a scream or there's like a stunned silence. And then kind of a continuation of that. Why, because why is magic so enthralling still? Because you can find out how the tricks work online. You know, we have video games that blow our synapses, kind of stuff, right?
Right.
So what do you think about all that?
Well, I mean, I think that there was, in the beginning at least, you know, there was a sense of control. you know, that I felt when I could do a magic trick, you know, you don't see now this time, right? I think that's kind of where it initially started. But as I got into it and started to understand it, you know, I was always a performer. I was a competitive tap dancer as a child. I did that up and down the East Coast for a number of years. And I still love doing it. I think there's some video of me at a burlesque show doing magic and tap dancing somewhere. You could probably look that up.
We had some rights restrictions on some of the clips, but yeah, please find them online and I'll put them in the YouTube.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. And then, but the cool thing about magic was that I could talk, right? You know, where, you know, with a dancing routine, you know, I necessarily couldn't. So I could converse about things. And eventually I learned that it's not like, you know, pick a card, any card, but it's, you know, what are you saying, right? Magicians, we always ask ourselves, I mean, performers of any kind, why should we care, right? Why should we be interested in what you're about to do? And so, like, kind of problem solving that, I think, is really interesting. You know, there isn't a perfect way to do something, but I think there certainly are right ways and wrong ways to do things. And so to uncover the truth of how to do something correctly, especially in magic, and the payoff at the end is really great. And then the magic for the audience is almost exclusively sight or sound. And the really good performers are multisensory, so that you're experiencing both at the same time. And as a person who understands magic and experiencing a magic show with somebody that understands that philosophy, I can generally pick up pretty much everything that's going on. And like the how to do things and all that stuff, like I don't, you know, I mean, for my own stuff, I'm interested in how to do it well. But like I don't really look at that when I'm experiencing other performers. What are you doing that's entertaining? What are you doing that's fun? What's exciting? You know, that kind of stuff is what I really get jazzed about with magic. And then from a performer's point of view, magic is a very tactile experience. So I'm always getting, you know, the tactile sensation of magic every time I perform. So I think that's a big part of it too.
How does it compare to the exhilaration of ascending a 14K for the first time?
I don't know, man. When you have 150 people screaming at you, he's hot. You know, that's pretty fun. So I'm not going to say it's better or worse, you know, but it's different. It's all, look, you know, it's funny because I kind of come in here and you know, I've done some 14ers. Yes, I drove blindfolded, you know, kind of thing. But you know, again, you know, have I done some of these extreme things that a lot of you guys have done? You know, probably not. Probably not. But there is a fear factor with performing that I challenge any human being to try and put themselves in that situation and survive. And it's so I think in that sense, you know, getting on stage and not seeing is scary as hell. And to be able to, you know, put yourself out there like that is also exhilarating. I heard a performer once say, a very famous one, says 5 minutes before he goes on, he always has the same wish, that it's canceled. Because that anxiety, that fear is so intense. But once you get over it, it becomes a rush, and you fall in love with it. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know. I think you know, there's the mountaineering is a physical exertion that maybe performing is not. And so I like feeling that full body high of just being exhausted from something. It feels great to be in that state. But there's also a joy from performing that can get really, really exciting.
Do you have a hankering to perform tonight at all?
Sure, I'd love to do, I'll do, yeah, let's do it.
Oh, wow.
I have just something small, because I knew we were going to be talking about a lot of stuff. Andrew, can you?
Yeah.
Do you mind coming over here?
No, not at all, sir.
All right. So yeah, you're going to have to be the eyes of the audience for a little bit.
Whoa.
So 4 solid silver Kennedy half dollars, American. 1964, if you're a numismatist.
Huh.
Any numismatists? Yep. All right, see, look at you. Wow. So you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Well, the coins themselves, that's not what's going to turn invisible, okay? But instead, it's going to be the space between the hands that's what's unseen.
Whoa. The coin is there.
Let's see. Now, by definition, this space must, oh, no, wait a minute, I'm sorry. It acts as a sort of, well, no man's land here between magic and reality. And by definition, this space here, it must remain unseen if we are to traverse into the impossible. 2 and 2, and now 1 and 3. Could you do me a favor? Give me your hands.
Yeah.
All right. And we'll just put it right here like this. Yeah, just cup it because you're going to be my table.
All right.
So that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, and then finally 4. And we'll just stack them up like this. Hold it, yep, because I don't want you to drop them. And nothing in the hands?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take one back, and I want you to close up your hands, okay? And this invisible line here will still work. Open up your hands.
Whoa.
4 coins.
Magic.
And count them.
There's nothing there.
No, yeah, count them.
Oh.
Yeah, right into my hand. 1,
1,
2, 3, and 4. Thank you very much.
Glorious. Wow. Could you sign my hand? I'll put a tattoo on it. After the...
Of course.
Excellent.
Yeah. We'll do that in the back.
All right.
I'll tattoo it for you, actually.
Ooh. Marvelous. Thank you so much. I'm really blown away. So yeah, the art of the unseen. Is that's what you delved into kind of as your career went on?
Yeah. So married.
Yeah.
I had a child.
All right.
And you know, part of magic is performing, travel, all those kinds of things, and it became really, really hard to do some of that as a parent. And not that it was hard to do, but I chose to be more present with my son. My wife has a very intense job, and I saw it as a gift to be able to take care of my boy. And so learning to be a blind parent was, you know, a whole adventure in and of itself. And the one thing that I would say about that was, you know, I had to make a real strong decision. You know, am I going to raise my boy inside this house and keep him safe because I'm blind? Or am I going to allow him to explore and live life free like me? And so when he was very little, toddler, I may cry, I don't know, but you know, he would want to go to the playground just like any other kid. And so, you know, I would take him, and we would have a rule that if I say your name, Harrison, you have to say, "Over here, Dad." And so I would start by, you know, just letting him play on one thing, and I would take a couple steps back, and I would do that. And eventually, you know, he became more and more free and more independent. And, you know, that's what I would do. And when he was a baby, I don't know if there's, I don't know if it's online, but there are pictures in our family photos. I used to take him hiking at Runyon Canyon when he was a little baby. And I had the baby backpack with a top loader, and I would have the bottle and the backpack and the kid and the cane. And you know those big steep steps at Runyon? So there was this, you know, and I would do the upper trail too. I love the upper trail. But there was this one day I'm feeling the rail ties with my cane and, you know, stepping carefully because he's on my back. And, you know, he's drumming on my head because that's what he likes to do. And anytime he was thirsty, I could grab the baby bottle like a holster and right in his mouth, you know, kind of. And there's pictures of me doing that for him. But this woman came up to me one day, and she's like, "I'm not comfortable with that." And I was just like, glad it's not your kid, you know? And so, you know, that required me to be home a little more. And I had an idea for a story, and it was after Bataclan in Paris happened. I was really upset because that's what I do. I go to shows. I love to go to, you know, to experience live music. And so it just, my son is in the living room, and he's watching his favorite cartoon, and he's on this little baby trampoline bouncing up and down, and I'm listening on my computer to this news that's coming out, and it just kind of shook me to my core, and I was really mad about it, and I started, you know, this idea of helplessness, of like, what do you do? And, you know, there was really nothing I could do. However, I started kind of playing around with an idea of a character that could do something. And, you know, I would talk to my wife about it every once in a while, and she was like, write it down. You know, so I started doing that, and, you know, my whole Dungeons & Dragons kind of adventures as a child kind of came back into play. And I knew that I wanted the character to be blind, and that I wanted to not give that character a superpower, because I felt that the superpower would have taken away from the blindness, and that wasn't my intention for the character. So I used the blindness as a power instead. And eventually I decided to make her female, and there was all the stuff going on in Afghanistan, and I started doing a lot of research about Afghanistan, and I made her Afghan. And then I started thinking about a different profession. And so this is where it got really interesting, is I have met so many different blind people. I've met, you know, blind martial artists, blind teachers, blind lawyers. I met a blind stunt pilot once. And there was some amazing stories there. I've met a blind cattle rancher. And what I learned from all those experiences is that if you have an idea of how it can be done, it probably can be done, you know? And I think that, you know, you look at a mountain and you're like, I'm gonna climb that. And the person next to you is going, you're crazy. And you find a way, and you get up there, and you get to the top, and you get to experience that. So I decided assassin would be cool. And so Afsana was born, and then I started creating a world around her, and it took place in the near future. I started playing around with a lot of technology and things like that she would use as tools to kind of give her the ability to do what she does, you know, and then you know, just kind of put it in this really interesting space. And at the same time, there was a company in Israel called Comics and Power who wanted to make comic books for blind people. And this is something that I was playing around with for a while myself, with you know, the Dungeons and Dragons and storytelling and comics and all that stuff. And I remember when the new Batman movie came out, and I really wanted to know what the new Batmobile looks like on screen. and it was really hard to describe, you know, so like to get a tactile model of it or a tactile drawing. I was like, you know, there's got to be a way that you can do this, but you know, there were so many things that I was dealing with at the time, it kind of went by the wayside. But then this company kind of came back, just brought it all back into the fold, and I contacted the person and I said, you know, this is amazing what you're doing, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. We had like a 2-hour conversation over Skype, and he eventually said, you know, are you working on anything? And I said, actually, I have an idea for something. He's like, write it down. I'm doing a contest. I would love to hear what you got going on. He helped me understand like the formula for making a comic as a writer, not as an illustrator. And so I submitted the story and I won. And I got a write-up in Vice magazine. And then from there, it just kind of laid there. And I said, you know, I'd say to my wife every once in a while, like, you know, what should I do with this? And she's like, I don't know. You know, like, you know, it's a cool idea, but I have no idea. Just out of nowhere, in 2018, the Exploratorium Museum up in San Francisco contacted me, and they said, we're doing a story on, we're doing an exhibit on identity, and we want your story to be on exhibit in our museum. Would you like that? And it was like, wow, what a wonderful opportunity this could turn into. And the version of the story was in audio format, but it wasn't exactly the way that I envisioned it. So I went to all my resources and tried to find a way to get it to be made the way that I wanted it to be made. And I wanted it to be very cinematic because comic books are very colorful and dynamic and angular and intense. And so I thought the soundscape needed to emulate that in order to have blind people who have never seen a comic book understand the experience of what it would be like to read a comic book. So that was the whole premise around this, and I went to a lot of my magician friends to be actors in the story. So a very famous magician by the name of Max Maven is one of the characters. A good friend of mine who's also an amazing performer, Misty Lee, played Afsana. One of LA's premier Houdini historians, a guy by the name of Patrick Culleton, became Frank Harris, my agent. You know, we got it done, and it was in the museum. It got a ton of press. I ended up getting an opportunity to get an offer through Audible, which I'm in negotiation right now, to try and get it into a full-length drama. And we'll see how that goes. I'm also pitching television now, so I've gone to Apple TV, and I've also gone to Netflix, and we're shopping it around to try and make it into a full-length story.
So you're a real superhero who invents fictitious superheroes. That's the jam now.
Thank you.
Phoebe, can we get some of that audio clip going, perhaps? Is that going to work through the AV guide?
Unseen is an audio comic. When you hear this sound, the panel has changed. Greetings, reader. I am Chad Allen, author of Unseen, and I happen to be blind. This is a story of a blind assassin from Afghanistan. She is strong, confident, and she's very, very good at what she does. Underestimating her is her enemy's gravest mistake. We're living in a challenging time, and as a person with a disability, my perspective is often excluded from the conversation. I hope you see the world a little differently after reading Unseen. Enjoy. Cover. The word unseen in bold letters, slowly fading as the word ends. A woman's face, young, confident, focused. Her dark hair is swept to the side, covering one eye. Underneath is a mask, extending down her face, forming 2 X's over her eyes, which are black as obsidian. This is Afsana, the heroine of Unseen.
Dawn rises over the southern border of the United States. The militarized zone is a hive of activity. Bunkers and military compounds dot the landscape. Lines of immigrants march through a large series of chain-link fences leading towards a convoy of buses. Buses are lined up, one behind another. Some of the immigrants appear weak and malnourished. The soldiers are in complete control, even though some immigrants attempt to fight back. They are yelling for food and water. The soldiers aggressively keep order while continuing to pack them into the buses. One soldier knocks a troublemaker down with the butt of his gun. The man is subdued by dragging him to a heavily armed vehicle in the back of the convoy. Soldiers with electronic tablets chart the events taking place. Some photos are shot, and prisoners are put in chains. There is a young woman wearing sunglasses and handcuffs moving to an empty bus. Her head is held by an officer, and she is escorted onto the bus. This is Afsana. The interior of the bus is dark, with the exception of the armed soldier's illuminated screen of his tablet. Afsana is cuffed, but now sitting.
You wanted trouble, and you found it. Now, if I get any crap, there's no one to help. I'll do to you whatever I want. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Hours have passed. Afsana is still sitting inside. The sun is beating down on the exterior of the bus, but no light can be seen. There's a bit of sweat on her brow. The soldier tosses his empty bottle of water onto the floor of the bus.
Listen, I'll be back. Remember, there's at least 100 officers with their guns on you. Don't mess with me.
Yes, sir.
The soldier gets up close and personal.
If you're a good girl, I'll bring you some water. Would you like that? Are you a good girl?
Afsana smiles.
I prefer to be bad.
Afsana frees herself from her handcuffs. She immediately wraps the chain between the wrist locks around his neck. He's completely caught off guard and is choking like a child. He's trying to scream, but her grip is so tight around his throat that no sound can escape. Afsana undresses the unconscious soldier behind one of the seats. She quickly removes her clothes and puts on the uniform. She picks up the bloody wire she used to pick the lock of the cuffs, allowing her to break free. Blood trickles out of her mouth. She bit through the flap of her cheek, hiding the pick. Afsana sits in the driver's seat of the bus, eyes closed. Outside the window, lines of troops and immigrants are at the wall. She listens intently to the activity outside. Her fingers feel around the dash, and she clicks on the radio. Afsana fusses with the channels on the radio. She's holding the mouthpiece with her chin.
Soldier is subdued, and I have control of the vehicle.
A voice from the radio says,
"Hold your position. Convoy is about to move."
Soldiers march up and down the line of buses, closing the doors one at a time. A soldier pokes his head in the bus.
Everything good here?
Affirmative.
It's a good cliffhanger, Phoebe.
Afsana turns the ignition and is sandwiched between the line of vehicles. The convoy heads south to a large military compound away from the wall.
Can we pause?
Afsana drives the bus. She hears commands from the voice on the radio.
Maintain speed. 12 degrees.
Oksana's in control now of the AV. Oh, thank you. How do you feel hearing that? And
It's just so exciting to be able to just there are certain projects that you if you have an opportunity to create and it becomes kind of independent of you, grows legs and starts walking around on its own, so to speak. And I think this story is really the one that has been able to do that for me. One of my I got a bunch of tweets when it first came out, and people emailing and contacting me and stuff. And one of my favorites, there were many, but one of my favorites was there was a guy. He's like, I'm walking the streets of Beijing with my cane in one hand, and I'm listening to a comic book over my phone in the other, feeling empowered, and it was neat to know that people all over the world were listening to, experiencing this story. And I look forward to sharing more and more and more. It's a big world, and I would love the opportunity with one of these companies to be able to make it into a full-length experience.
do you view it as a continuation of other blind superheroes, or is this kind of a unique thing because it's from your unique existential voice?
Yeah, I mean, most people think of Daredevil as the first, thing, but I think what I usually tell people is, Daredevil actually has super sight, so he can see in the same way that a person with, 20/20 vision, but 360 degrees around because of his superpower. So, that's not where I'm going with Afsana. I want her to be able to use the skills of blindness and then in conjunction with technology to be able to do the types of things that she wants to do. So I think in that sense it's unique, a superhero without a superpower. But it definitely fits the comic book genre. So I think that answered your question.
It does,
Okay.
extremely well. Yeah, so where do you see this kind of thing moving the culture, or like your unique voice within it? Because it's designed for blind listeners as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the original intent, but obviously, everybody can experience it. And, it was really fun to kind of hear some people, somebody told me that they had to pull over because they were so into the story that they couldn't, drive and listen at the same time, which is, I think is kind of defeats the purpose of what Audible may be wanting me to do, but, so that kind of stuff is fun. But I think the ultimate goal for this is, do you know what a transmedia story is? So, like Star Wars, you can tell the story of Star Wars through a comic book, you can tell it through a movie, you can tell it through a TV show, you can tell it through a box of cereal, you can tell it through a video game. And I would love Unseen to be the first fully accessible transmedia story. So I have, I've had conversations about how the video game would be designed and kind of intentions behind that. So, for example, like, you could get to certain levels in the game, by looking at the screen, but if you want to get, to the higher levels, you have to turn the screen off and use the adaptive technology tools within the game to navigate the world like the character. So stuff like that I'd like to do. The spatial audio stuff is very, very attractive to me, which is, you hear a flame over here and you turn your head and now it's center, to your POV, and to be able to, work in that space would be really cool. To be able to do more museum exhibits, especially with tactile drawings now instead of just the audio. If I had resources to do that, I would really like to do that as well. But then also, the graphic novel, traditional would also be really fun. And then I think the ultimate would be the TV show, if I can get a chance to do that, which again, I've had the opportunity to pitch to Netflix and Apple TV now, and, we're working it.
Do you have a lead in mind, or let's hush hush?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Cart before horse, sir.
Right. Yeah, congratulations, and I'm enthralled to kind of bear witness as the spark of your brilliance and imagination becomes a flame throughout the world. I have many more questions, but time is a finite resource, and we have to send over to our beautiful audience. Thank you for talking to me and sharing the stage.
Thank you so much.
To the audience, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jorge. Again, I've been returning for a minute here. Question for the little side note you said about the video game. With technology just advancing oh so quickly, and specifically in the entertainment industry, how it's, 3D movies weren't really a thing. We had our 3D glasses, and it was just sort of two layers coming at you, but now 3D movies have become this sort of experience in a sense. You're not just watching something, as you put it oh so graciously, you are now experiencing it. It's not just your eyes, it's so many other senses. And again, with technology becoming so insane, truthfully,
What's the question? Sorry, we're
the question is, for a video game idea, would it be based on your superhero, or would it be a completely different story?
Oh no, I would definitely want to base it within the Unseen universe. I have other stories that I'm working on as well, You know, they're always asking for, you know, what else you got going on, and, you know, I want to be prepared for those types of things. But Afsana is the blind character. It's the thing that I've definitely put more of my heart and energy into. So yeah, to do it, I mean, like, you ever play the game Tenchu Ninja Assassin? Do you know what I'm talking about on PlayStation? It's all about stealth, right? So you're maneuvering through the game to be unseen, and then, you know, put your assassin tools to use. And I think that as an idea would be really cool, but, you know, to feel the heartbeat of the victim and get, you know, into that, I think would be really fun.
What happened to the love, man?
She's an assassin, dude. She's an assassin, but, you know, there is an arc, so she does find her way into other noble things, but I gotta get people to want to make it for me
First
to
the
tell
murder,
it.
then the love.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Chad, Jeff Holmes, 1148. Over dinner, I mentioned to you, I meet almost all the guests that come to this club, and you interact with people better than most, if not all, the visitors we have come to this club. And I asked you, is that a social skill you learned when you had sight, or something you learned after you lost your sight? And without missing a beat, you said as a child you were a competitive tap dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I thought you might be pulling my leg, but listening to you tonight, I guess you weren't. What was it about competitive tap dancing that changed your life?
Well, it was my first opportunity on stage, you know, so to be in front of an audience and to share your skills is something that I've always been fascinated with. My best friend growing up was in the same school as I was, and we both left dance. He ended up being a professional juggler, and at a time I ended up being a professional magician. We live in two completely different places, but you know, the charisma, the magic, the writing, all of those things I think help with you know, being able to communicate and articulately an idea. And I think that's really important to, you know, being able to interact with people. I'm also really passionate about just humans. So I'm always interested in hearing differences of opinion and ideas, and so I can be very attentive towards those types of things. And then, you know, part of the thing with blindness is I live as a blind person in a sighted world. There is no getting around that. So when I talk to people, I like to be looking at them. And not because I'm seeing them, but because it is important for them to know that I care and that I'm paying attention to what they are trying to tell me. You know?
Chad, Lance Miller, 1122. This has been a phenomenal presentation, and what an incredible accomplishments you've had. And I just have to ask you, is there anything else that's on your bucket list that you want to check off? Because you're doing so much. You're doing more than most people that, you know, have their sight do. And it's just amazing what you're doing. And it's inspirational, and it's impressive, and I'm thrilled to hear your story.
I want to make a TV show, man. That's the next thing.
Ah, you want to get in the pictures, huh?
I want that experience. I want to, you know, look, and I'm a first-time writer. You know, I have a long way to go, but to be able to go and have that experience, I think would be phenomenal. And for a blind person to make a TV show, what a change that can make in people's perspectives about what we can do as human beings. Blindness is a characteristic, it's not a disability. The disability is the misconception, you know? I get to live my experience, my life like this. That's not a bad thing. I'm not part of a person, I'm a whole person, and I'm proud of that.
My name is Scott Gagan. We met earlier. I'm fascinated by everything that you've told us tonight. It was really an amazing speech, I guess you would say, or interview. One thing I'm curious about is, did you ever have to deal with anybody bullying you in life? Was there ever any prejudice that you dealt with?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll give a. I mean, there's plenty of examples, but I mean, you know, you deal with misconceptions about blindness as a blind person every day. You know, it could be, you know, just people overcompensating, or you know, different attitudes and perceptions. But I mean, as far as like an actual example. You know, I walk the streets of Los Angeles by myself. There's, you know, a horrible amount of homeless people in this world, which saddens me to a great degree. And I wish there was more that could be done to change that. But you know, they're struggling, and they have their biases and their misconceptions as well. So there was this one time. I used to live over on Sunset and Cherokee, and this gentleman kept coming up to me and harassing me. And you know, every morning on my way to work, I would get the same treatment, and it would be, you know, really dumb stuff like, "Look out for that elephant in the road, ha ha ha," you know, and you know, just really like intentionally trying to give me a hard time. And one day I stopped. And I said, "Why are you doing this?" And I talked to him, and I looked right at him, you know, in the same way that, you know, I was explaining before. And I said, "I'm just trying to do my thing. I understand that you're having a hard time, you know, but I'm living my life, and I would like to be left alone. Can you do that?" And I put out my hand, and I shook his hand. And you know, it was all like tree bark. You know, because of the struggle that these people have to deal with on a regular basis. But, you know, how many people have that kind of connection with another person? And he never bothered me again. So I think kindness is key. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jason. Jason Risk. I'm friends with Andrew McGregor, and I feel so blessed to have been invited here tonight, and your stuff is on fire, Chad. And I would expect you to go home and have a message from Apple TV or Netflix going, "Can we have a meeting tomorrow? Coda just won the Academy Award for Best Picture. We want to be in business with you." But my question is, as a struggling writer myself, what is your process, and how do you face the blank white page and develop your stories and try to consistently work every day, struggling with being a family man and a parent and all the responsibilities you have? How do you carve out time to write, to tell your stories every day so that you make progress?
I kick my family out of the house. Seriously, like they'll go away, and unfortunately I don't get the vacation time, but instead I get the writing time. So that's one way to do it. You have to piecemeal it. I wish I was that person that just pounded, you know, 4 hours of writing every day and then went to the gym, and I try to be that person, and I will continue to try to be that person, but it just doesn't, life just doesn't work that consistently for me. So, you know, I get it in every second I can get. And as far as the blank page is concerned, I think the best piece, because here's the thing, I was learning as I was writing. You know, I had no idea what I was really doing, especially to the level at which, you know, you have to execute in this environment here in Los Angeles. It's insane. If you just put slop on a page, whatever it is, right, you can fix something, but you can't fix nothing. So put it out there, let it be bad, celebrate the bad, and then get at it, you know? Yeah, I mean, look, if it's terrible, if it's trash, you can edit
something, but you can't edit nothing. So the first step is no judgment on the first draft. You just do it. Stream of consciousness, whatever. Just get it out of your head and just throw it on there, and now you have something to work with. So I think that helps a lot. And then don't fool yourself into thinking that you're going to remember it after, the next day or the next hour. When you think of it, whatever it is, write it down. Our phones are so readily available now. I use voice memos like a crazy person. Or I'll send myself text messages. I don't know. I send myself emails, all that stuff, so that I don't forget. And a lot of inspiration comes from the weirdest places, right? You get in the shower, you have a moment, you're like, oh man, that's what I want to do. Phone's right there. I dry off my hand, I call Siri, make a note, and then I can go on and I can say at least it's there, and I don't have to worry about it. Very cool. Yeah. But keep doing it. Yeah.
So you said you're a big music fan, so music question and a kind of serious question that might sound flippant. You said live music is your thing.
Mm-hmm.
Any Grateful Dead experiences? Any opinions there?
Oh, man. I missed out on that, sadly. He died in, 90?
Yeah, I heard the 2001, 96. And I thought you might.
Yeah, I was close. I almost went to the candlelight vigil for Jerry Berry at Red Rock's Natural Outdoor Amphitheater, but unfortunately I didn't get that. But Dick's Picks Volume 6 is my favorite Grateful Dead album, if you want to know.
So then my serious question that might sound flippant is, I was lucky enough to see Jerry when he was around, and part of a Dead show is psychedelics.
Sure.
And I'm wondering about psychedelics in the blind community.
Okay.
Not necessarily a personal question for you, but do blind people do drugs, and what do they see when they do?
Blind people are a composite of all of us. So blindness is, in a way, we like to say, is unbiased, right? So there's every shape and size and color and disposition and political affiliation and religious belief and atheist and every dynamic you could possibly imagine in the blindness community. If you wanna hear stories of blindness conventions in the 1960s, there was stuff. So I mentioned Eric Woods and his Widowmaker. He was a big, big, big deadhead. And he played mandolin like you wouldn't believe. And so, my wife would call it rolling down the river music. But yeah, we would party. And, see, again, you see with the brain. Yeah. So your experiences are your experiences. So how you receive that information is how you would, how your memories reflect. This is what I say to my friends' kids. They're like, how do you know I'm here? Right? Like, how do you know I'm standing here? Right? 'Cause you're yelling. Right? But, and I say to them, and they're like, how do you know where you are? How do you do this? Da, 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 da. And I say, okay, let me ask you a question. Do you go to bed? And they go, yeah. And I say, okay. And when you go to bed, do you close your eyes? And they go, yeah. And I say, when you go to sleep, do you dream? And they say, yeah. And I say, well, what do you dream about? And they say, monsters and mom and this, that, and the other thing. And I say, do you see them in your dreams? And they go, yeah. And I say, with your eyes closed? We see with the brain.
I can roll out on that profundity. Phoebe, take us home.